It was a Sunday morning, and the church was filled with worshippers. Pastor Nelson stood behind the pulpit, delivering his sermon. Everyone was listening, everyone except little John. John sat beside his mom near the middle of the church. At first, he was quietly playing with his fingers while his mother listened to the sermon. Then he looked up at the pastor. His eyes widened. He stared for a few seconds. Then he grabbed his mother's arm. Mommy? His mother glanced at him. What is it? John pointed towards the pulpit. Mom, look at his head. His mother frowned. Look at what? The thorns. What thorns? John pointed again. There are thorns on his head. His mother looked towards Pastor Nelson. She saw nothing unusual. The pastor was standing normally, dressed in his suit, preaching to the congregation. No, John, she whispered. There is nothing on his head. Pay attention to the preaching. But John continued staring. The strange thing he saw was still there. A crown of sharp thorns appeared to be wrapped around the pastor's head. They were long, dark, and twisted together. John became uncomfortable. He tugged at his mother's dress again. Mommy, look, the thorns are still there. His mother looked once more, but saw nothing. She turned back towards her son. John, stop disturbing me. John obeyed for a moment, but he could not stop looking. Every time he looked at Pastor Nelson, the thorns were still there. They seemed so real that John wondered why nobody else was reacting. He looked around the church. Nobody seemed frightened. Nobody seemed to notice. The pastor continued preaching as though nothing was wrong. John leaned closer to his mother. Then, in a small voice, he whispered again, Mommy, won't the thorns hurt him? His mother turned sharply. There are no thorns on his head. John went quiet, but tears began forming in his eyes. He did not understand why his mother could not see what was so obvious to him. The pastor eventually finished preaching. The congregation applauded, and the service continued. But John remained disturbed. By the time the service ended, he was crying. His mother held his hand as they walked out of the church. Why are you crying, John? She asked. John wiped his face. Because of the thorns on the pastor's head. His mother shook her head. John, we have talked about this. But Mommy, I saw them. You didn't see any thorns. Mommy, I did. People were walking past them as they left the church. So his mother lowered her voice. Stop talking about it. But John wouldn't let it go. As they walked home, he kept repeating the same words. Mommy, there were thorns on his head. His mother finally stopped working. She stared at her son. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't trying to make a joke. He looked genuinely troubled. John's mother worked as a cleaner in the church, so she knew she could easily meet with the pastor. So she decided to take John back to the church and let the pastor speak to him. Maybe after hearing the boy himself, he would understand what was troubling him and calm him down. John stopped crying and followed her quietly. After waiting for some time in the reception area, they were eventually allowed into pastor's office. The pastor was seated behind his desk when they entered. He looked up. Come in. John's mother greeted him and stood nervously in front of the desk. Pastor, please, I need to explain something. Pastor Nelson looked at her. What happened? She glanced at John. Then she began explaining everything that had happened during the service. She told him how he had repeatedly claimed to see thorns and told him that the boy had continued talking about them all the way home. Pastor Nelson stared at John. For a moment, there was silence. Then he burst out laughing. He laughed loudly. John's mother forced a nervous smile. Pastor Nelson kept laughing. Finally, He wiped his face and looked at the woman. Have they paid your salary this month? The woman's smile disappeared. She lowered her head. No, sir. Pastor Nelson nodded knowingly. Oh, no wonder. He reached into his pocket, pulled out some money, and handed it to her. Take this. Get some food for him. He is probably hungry. That is why he is saying these things. The woman felt even more embarrassed. She took the money. Thank you, sir. But before she could leave, John spoke. I am not hungry. His mother looked at him. John, I am not hungry, mommy. Pastor Nelson chuckled. John pointed at him. I know what I saw. I am not hungry. His mother immediately grabbed his hand. Keep quiet. But mommy, I said enough. She pulled him towards the door. John struggled to keep explaining. I saw them. His mother dragged him out of the office. I'm not hungry, mommy. I know what I saw. John continued crying. His voice echoed as they walked down the hallway. His mother tightened her grip on his hand and kept walking, but John continued to cry. When they got home, John was unusually quiet. He stayed indoors for the rest of the day, thinking about what had happened at church. The image of the thorns on Pastor Nelson's head remained in his mind. The following Sunday, it happened again. The moment Pastor Nelson climbed the pulpit, John looked up, and there they were, the thorns. The same strange crown was wrapped around the pastor's head. John became restless in his seat. Mommy! His mother immediately turned to him. John, listen to me. Stop saying these things. You're embarrassing me. Even if you think you see something, keep it to yourself. Don't say it again. Do you understand? John nodded. Yes, Mommy. From that day, he found a way to protect himself. Whenever Pastor Nelson stepped onto the pulpit, John stopped looking at him. Sometimes he closed his eyes. Sometimes he bent his head and stared at the floor. Other times, he pretended to be sleeping. He simply did not want to see the thorns. Weeks passed. The strange visions continued. But John never mentioned them again. His mother thought the problem was over. She was wrong. About a month later, on another Sunday morning, Pastor Nelson stood before the congregation as usual. He was preaching with his normal confidence. He walked from one side of the pulpit to the other. He raised his voice. He waved his hands. The congregation listened. John kept his head down. He refused to look up. Then, in the middle of the sermon, the pastor suddenly stopped. The microphone slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. The entire church went silent. Pastor Nelson stared ahead. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then, he reached for his tie. He pulled it off. People began looking at one another. The pastor removed his suit jacket. A few members laughed nervously. They thought perhaps he was doing something unusual for the sermon. But then he removed his shirt. The laughter stopped. The elder stood up. Pastor? Nelson didn't answer. He removed his shoes. Then he began reaching for his trousers. One of the elders immediately shouted, Hold him! The ushers rushed towards the pulpit. Pastor Nelson began laughing. Not an ordinary laugh. It was loud, uncontrolled laughter that echoed through the church. He laughed as though something was terribly funny, even though nobody else knew what he was laughing about. Two ushers grabbed him. He pushed one of them away. Another man rushed forward. Soon, several people were struggling to hold him. Pastor, calm down! But Nelson continued laughing and fighting. Eventually, they managed to drag him away from the pulpit and into one of the rooms in the church compound. The prayer warriors gathered around him. They began praying. Others laid hands on him. Someone started singing worship songs. They prayed again and again, but Nelson remained violent. He fought against them. He laughed. Then suddenly, after a long struggle, his body became still. He His eyes closed. He fell asleep. Everyone became quiet. The prayer warriors looked at one another. One of the elders sighed with relief. Thank God! They assumed the prayers had finally worked. They carefully locked the room and returned to the church. The service continued, but nobody was really listening anymore. The atmosphere had changed. The sermon was shortened. People were dismissed. As the congregation began leaving, whispers spread throughout the church. Did you see what happened to Pastor Nelson? He has gone mad. Maybe something attacked him. Don't say that. Some people were frightened. Others whispered and speculated. A few even laughed about what had happened. But some members simply shook their heads and prayed for him. Shortly after the service ended, an usher was carrying the offering box towards the accountant's office when he heard a loud bang from the room where Pastor Nelson had been locked. He stopped. Another sound followed. The usher turned around. He quickly called some of the prayer warriors and church workers. They ran towards the room. When they opened the door, they found Pastor Nelson violently throwing himself against it. He was laughing again. Pastor! They tried to call him, but he became even more aggressive. It took several men to hold him down. Eventually, they had no choice. They tied his hands and legs to stop him from hurting himself or anyone around him. The prayer warriors surrounded him once again. They prayed, they shouted, they laid hands on him. They prayed until they were exhausted, but nothing changed. Pastor Nelson remained trapped in that strange state. He laughed one moment, then he became angry. Then he became completely silent. Then the laughter returned. Nobody understood what was happening to him. That afternoon, John and his mother walked home together. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then, John looked up at his mother. Mommy. She looked down. What is it, John? I told you. His mother knew exactly what he meant. There were thorns on his head. John said quietly, I told you. His eyes filled with tears. I knew something was about to happen. His mother stopped working. John began crying. He felt guilty, as though somehow he should have been able to stop what happened. His mother immediately pulled him into her arms. Don't blame yourself, John. You did your part. She told him, we went to him. We told him what you saw. He was the one who didn't take it seriously. John said nothing. That night, something even stranger happened. John dreamed. In the dream, he saw a young woman dressed completely in white. She was holding a baby. The baby was also dressed in white. The woman was crying. John stood still, staring at her. She slowly raised her hand. Then she pointed towards someone standing in the distance. Pastor Nelson. John looked at him. The woman began crying even harder. John wanted to ask her who she was, but before he could speak, he woke up. He sat upright in bed, frightened and breathing heavily. The room was dark. He looked around. His mother was asleep nearby. John stayed awake until morning. As soon as his mother woke up, he told her everything. He described the woman and her baby, and he told her that the woman had pointed towards Pastor Nelson. His mother listened, but instead of feeling curious, she became afraid. John, she said quietly, don't tell anyone about this. Why, Mommy? Just don't. But Mommy, I mean it, don't tell anyone. John became silent. Meanwhile, Pastor Nelson's condition continued to deteriorate. The church refused to give up on him. Different pastors were invited. Prophets came. Prayer warriors came from other churches. They prayed over him. They fasted. They anointed him with oil. They called his name during prayers, but nothing worked. Pastor Nelson remained trapped in the same terrifying condition. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into a month. But Pastor Nelson did not get better. He remained in the same strange condition. Sometimes he laughed for no reason. Sometimes he became violent. At other times, he simply stared into space as though he was somewhere far away. The church leadership had tried everything they knew, but eventually they realized that he could no longer remain in the church compound. His family had to be contacted. Pastor Nelson was not originally from that state. He had only recently been transferred there for his first pastoral assignment. His family came as soon as they heard what had happened. They took him back to his village. His mother was devastated. She could not understand how the son she knew had suddenly become so different. She refused to accept that nothing could be done. So she began searching for help. She visited different spiritual houses. She met people who claimed to understand strange afflictions. She spoke with prayer warriors, spiritual advisors, and anyone who told her they might be able to help her son. She was desperate. Then, during one of those visits, she met a prophet who claimed that he had received a revelation concerning Nelson. The man's expression changed as he spoke. "There is something behind what is happening to your son." Nelson's mother leaned forward. "What is it, sir?" The man closed his eyes for a moment. Then he began explaining what he claimed to have seen. 3 years earlier, before Nelson became a pastor in the city, he had traveled to a village. At that time, he was not yet a minister. He was simply a young man who had recently finished his studies and was waiting for the next opportunity in his life. The people in the village liked him. He was handsome, confident, and spoke good English. The young women especially noticed him. Several of them wanted his attention. One of those women was named Joy. Joy was young, cheerful, and deeply interested in Nelson. Before long, the two became close. Nelson told Joy things she wanted to hear. He spoke about the future. He told her they would be strong together. He promised her that one day they would have a beautiful life. Joy believed him. Eventually, they began sleeping together. For months, everything seemed fine. Then, Joy discovered that she was pregnant. She was excited and nervous at the same time. When she finally told Nelson, he pretended to be happy. He congratulated her. He told her everything would be fine. But something had changed. Days later, Nelson told her that he needed to travel to the city for an urgent meeting. "I won't be gone for long," he promised. Joy believed him. She waited. 1 week passed, then another. Nelson did not return. She tried calling him. He stopped answering. She sent messages, no response. She asked people who knew him. Nobody seemed to know where he was. Eventually, Joy realized that Nelson had disappeared from her life. She was pregnant, alone, and unable to understand how the man who had promised her a future could simply walk away. Months passed. Her father watched his only daughter go through the pregnancy without the man responsible for it. He was angry, but Joy kept hoping that Nelson would eventually return. But he never did. Then the day of the delivery came. Something went wrong. The people around Joy tried to save her. They rushed to get help. They did everything they could. But despite their efforts, Joy and her baby couldn't make it. Her father was completely broken. Joy had been his only child. The loss destroyed him, but grief soon turned into anger. He could not understand how his daughter could be gone while the man who had gotten her pregnant was somewhere living his life. He blamed Nelson. Joy's father eventually went to her grave. He performed rituals. He called upon her spirit. He cried and demanded justice. He wanted whoever was responsible for his daughter's suffering to experience the consequences. And according to the prophet, that was where Nelson's strange affliction began. When Nelson's mother heard everything, she broke down. She cried bitterly. She could hardly believe that her son could have done such a thing to Joy. "Is there anything we can do, sir?" she asked desperately. The prophet looked at her. "Actions have consequences," he said. Nelson's mother began crying even harder. "Please, please, sir, help my son." The man remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "There is nothing prayer cannot do. Continue praying for mercy. Do not stop praying. Perhaps, with time, his senses will be restored." She wiped her tears and nodded. She had come looking for an explanation. Now, she had one, but instead of bringing her relief, it left her heart heavy. She returned home determined to keep praying for her son.